Welcome into Sports Source Overtime here at sportsource.tv. I'm going to say Sports Source one more time just so it's a lucky 3. This segment of our program, our overtime show here, is brought to you by Smokin' Joe's, 2 locations. One in Alcoa, which is beautiful, huge walk-in humidor, and then their original store still on Paper Mill. In terms of best selection of cigars in the area, they have it when you combine that with the prices. You're not going to find better selection and prices combined anywhere other than Smokin' Joe's in Alcoa, Smokin' Joe's on Paper Mill. Get down there and see Mike Hicks and his family. They're good people. All right. Into this segment with Josh Ward from Sports Radio WNML. I always want to slip.
You nailed it.
And then longtime media maven in this town.
Mogul.
We have Chuck Cavaleris, diva, Chief Chuck Cavaleris. Want to get to a couple of questions that were zipped in. First of all, does Tennessee have a receiver on this team that's going to strike fear? This is the person's quote, strike fear into the hearts of opponents. I think you have a couple of those guys that could. I don't know that you've got a quarterback who is the type of quarterback who will make them fear these guys. I think this is clearly going to be a run-first team once again. So, do you have a guy like Preston Williams who has the talent to scare people? I think so. But if you don't hit him, then there's no real scare there. It's not his fault. But if he's not catching passes, what's there to be afraid of?
If I think of guys that have caused opposing defenses to fear the receiver, it'd be Ridley, Amari Cooper at Alabama, Laquan Treadwell at Ole Miss. I can't make close to that kind of comparison with Tennessee's receivers. Preston Williams would be the guy when he goes out on the field, you better be aware of him because he's the guy that you could see striking 50, 60 yards down the field. Yeah. The others are good players, but I don't think they strike fear in opposing defense.
But that's what you hope emerges, between now and August. Is there a guy that an opposing defensive coordinator says, well, we got to make sure and shade our coverage this way, or we got to give our corner help? No, if I think there is a receiver that does that, his name's Alvin Kamara. And some of the things he does. And I could see sometimes if you're trying to get them both on the field to get touches, maybe using him a little bit as a slot receiver. But yes. Otherwise, no.
Yeah, I think Juwan Jennings is a guy that can make plays on his own when he catches a short pass or a smart pass. But I don't think there's anyone that just, as you mentioned, that's going to have pro scouts drooling this year and say, wow, look at the body type. We don't have anybody that can match up with this guy, either the blazing speed or the fantastic physique that also is going to go out and get passes that eat him in the hands. It's a two-way street, and I think this team is going to still be run first, run second, and then pass third, which is going to be frustrating for some people at times, but you were pretty good with it last year. That's clearly your strength. So I would say no. There are no wide receivers on this team that strike fear into the heart of opponents.
Yeah, and the offense is a big reason why, because they will be so reliant on the running game, which Tennessee should. When you have Hurd and Kamara coming back and Dobbs' ability, you should be relying on the running game.
And 4 of your 5 offensive linemen.
Right. Yeah, so that's what I would be trying to do to start things off. And they've got guys that can make plays. You think about the Josh Smith catch and run against Georgia. You're trying to get more out of him in that area at the slot position, which he's moving to. So there's still potential there, but the scary threat. Josh Malone came in with a ton of talent. Remember that out of high school, and he's shown flashes of ability, but still there's a big step to take, and he's not out there this spring.
Well, yeah, if you want to go back through it, Marquez North was a guy that you would have penciled in as, he will be one of these guys, and he never turned into it, whether that's his whether it was injuries, his lack of development or coaching or the offense. Something they're never fired. So I think it's fair to say you don't have that guy yet. People get tired of hearing they believe it when I see it, but I'll tell you they got one that scares people when I see one that scares people. All right. Elliott Berry. Someone asked, what's Elliott Berry's situation? Everybody talks about Evan Berry, of course, All-American kick returner last year. But Elliott Berry, the forgotten Berry, injured last year as they moved him from one position to another.
Right. He got to college and he's making the transition to linebacker. Then you deal with health issue in your second year. It's also a position where you have 2 guys that have clearly emerged in Jalen Reeves-Maybin and Darren Kirkland Jr., but a number of other guys that have talent that are also getting an opportunity. Cortez Sapp, very good athletic, very good athlete. Cortez McDowell. So there's a lot of players they're hoping 2 or 3 guys can emerge from.
Yeah. So I don't take that as I don't know that the expectations were as high for Elliott Berry as they were for Evan Berry coming in, and it doesn't mean he's not going to contribute. But I don't know that he's a guy, if people are expecting him to be Eric or Evan. I don't
No.
think he's at that
But
level.
you
And I
still
don't
hope-
think Evan's at Eric.
Yeah, Evan still has a lot to prove at safety.
Yeah.
His obvious impact, and it's been a big one, has been in special teams.
And you still hope there will be a chance at some point for one of those breakthrough moments, that there is a time and a place where it does fall in place for Eric Berry.
Or any of the Berries.
Alec Berry.
Ezekiel Berry. The guys like Berry, though, that come in and because they have a name, people are watching them a little more close. Dylan Bates is another example. If his name was Dylan Smith,
Sure.
I don't think you'd
Yeah.
have people calling into shows and sending messages, where's Dylan Smith? But because he's who he is, because he's the son of whose his father was, does that make sense? He's going to get a little bit more attention than I think some guys would.
And you have several legacy players, so they're all kind of grouped together, right?
Yes.
Todd Kelly Jr. is in that group as well. Khalil McKenzie's a year younger than some of the others, but you also have Evan and Elliott. Remember, they were track stars in high school, so they were followed while Eric was making such a big impact in college and then the NFL. As freshmen in high school, people were doing stories on Evan and Elliott.
Well, who was the first? Was it Kiffin that offered them first? Who offered them first when they were
Yeah, I thought they were like
still
in the 8th grade
junior
or
high
something.
school?
Yeah.
Yeah, so technically they've gotten coverage since then. Pro Day, one thing we didn't talk about in the show, didn't have time for it. We wanted to talk about the team in the fall. But Pro Day was this past week, and if anybody helped himself, and helped Tennessee, because there was a chance Tennessee wasn't going to get anybody drafted this year for the second year in a row. Now, next year, anybody that's sitting there blaming Butch Jones for that, blame the previous guy for that, because next year, when the Jones class is ready to go, huge. And if he'd had guys like Sutton and Kamara and Reese Maven leave this year, you'd had 3 automatically. But a guy that's helped himself and Tennessee's case in this, Brian Randolph, had a really good pro day in terms of the strength he showed, the speed he showed. A lot of the talk coming out of it from the scouts was, now we got to go back and see why that didn't show on the field as much as you would think with those kind of measurable numbers. Personally, I put more stock in what I see on the field than I do those measurable numbers. But in terms of getting drafted, I think Brian Randolph, it would surprise me if he's not selected with the type of pro day he had. Thoughts?
Well, and he pointed out, Brian Randolph did, that, hey, I don't start for 5 years in the SEC because he was injured in 2012 towards ACL against Florida, so redshirted, but you don't start for 5 years if you can't play in the SEC. And I think that's right. So the numbers, I think, will help get him more attention. And if you talk to him, talk to people around him, I think they'll back him up as well.
Yeah, I
A
think
lot of tackles in his career.
he made some plays.
Yeah.
I mean, and go back to the end of the Georgia game. He made the play at the end of the Georgia game. Just the consistency might not have been there, but he also showed a lot of personality. You know, he talked about his hair and how he doesn't cut it because he's like Samson. You know, if he's going to lose his power, going to lose his strength. So I think he really did. And you're talking, what, 5th round, 6th round, whatever? Somebody needs a DB or somebody that can help him. That would be hard to pass up.
And I think the fact that Justin Coleman wasn't drafted last year but signed
Yeah.
as a free agent and got kicked around 3 different teams and finally stuck and wound up getting a contract at the end of the year, I think that helps him as well, because you're looking at this program kicking out somebody that's in the secondary that's played well.
Fairly similar, wouldn't you think? I mean, in terms of some of the way they played.
And if anything, Randolph, I think, was thought more highly of as a player
than
in
Coleman.
Tennessee
Right.
than Justin Coleman. Yeah.
Right.
Coleman's another guy that went and had a big pro day. He was at the combine last year and had a pretty good combine,
Right.
Which got him onto the radar. But again, he didn't get drafted. I do think Randolph will get drafted. Think anybody else will get drafted? I mean, Marquez North left early. He's another guy he's shown speed in these measures, but you have to ask, why did his receptions drop 3 straight years? And is he an injury prone?
Marquez North would be the first guy I'd think of when you're 6'3", 223, running a sub 4.5 40. It just takes one team in the 6th round to say, hey, we've got a spot, and this guy could be a big-time player. Why don't we take a shot? Remember, Bryce Brown didn't have the injury issues, but he hadn't played much college football. Andy Reid said, let's give him a shot.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I can't really think, because so many of those guys, it's going to be better if you can get a free agent deal, because you got more of a choice of where you go, and if you get a good agent, I think that's got to work out better for you. But nobody really jumps off that may be drafted.
Yeah, to me, it's Randolph, and then North would be your next most likely.
Yeah, Kirk Magid's injury
that holds it
issue
back.
still being there is a problem.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he still isn't over it and
Right.
still can't get involved in these things has to
And
hurt.
has the history.
And you also, he's talking about that he's a team leader and a stand-up guy. and looking at how teams draft, I don't know if they're going to pay attention to one story that came out that he decked a teammate. They may look at it and say, if that did happen, we like that. Who knows? But that's another thing that's a question mark that he's having to answer questions about, if nothing else.
Right. Magent would definitely be a camp-in-by guy. Several of these guys
Right.
would be that.
Depending on health.
Remember Tiny Richardson? He was a guy that I think he was a surprise when he ended up not being drafted. He had a major knee issue, retired after 1 year.
Yeah. All right, guys. Chuck Cavaleris, Josh Ward, thank you both for hanging around. Thank you for watching. Thank you for checking in. We will see you next Sunday, 11 a.m. on WATE 6 in East Tennessee, and right back here on SportSource.tv on Sunday afternoon for all of those watching around the globe. See you next Sunday.